Washington Journal continues.
President Obama this week said lawmakers need to make it harder for people to buy powerful assault weapons like those used in the San Bernardino shooting. So this morning on the Washington Journal, we're looking back at the last time Congress passed a major assault weapons ban. Jim Kessler works at the think tank Third Way, as a key House staffer who helped move that 1994 piece of legislation. So take us back to 1994. Explain the political climate at the time surrounding the issue of guns.
Well, it was a very different time in that crime was really the #1 social issue in the country. If you remember in 1988, Mike Dukakis essentially lost the presidential race over an ad about Willie Horton, someone that had been in jail and had been let out under the Dukakis administration and then raped and killed somebody. So crime was much more top of mind for voters then than it is now. So there was all sorts of things that were happening to try and reduce crime in the country. We passed the Brady Law in 1993 that had background checks for all firearm purchases. That was a major law. There was a major crime bill as well. And then along the way, part of that crime bill was the assault weapons ban, to ban kind of specific types of military-style weapons. And, it was a Donnybrook. I mean, it was a very, very, very close vote that, we prevailed. I worked for Chuck Schumer at the time. We prevailed 216 to 214. It was in doubt all the way.
And as you said, you work for Chuck Schumer, who's a key player here. We're going through the history of it, but want to show our viewers a video of Chuck Schumer during this debate over the crime bill in which the assault weapons ban was a part eventually included.
It doesn't mean equal, but it does mean a fair share. And the bill is fair. It gives a fair share to each of the basic elements we need to fight crime: police, prevention, and punishment. And of course, the bill has the assault weapons ban we approved in the last conference. The American people want this ban against deadly killing machines, and the American people are demanding we pass it now. Now, we can all pick at this bill and point to what we don't like and recreate the gridlock of last week, last year, and the last decade. But the moment is here. The question is clear, and America is watching. A vote for this bill is a vote for a good, tough, smart crime bill. It is a vote for the future. But most of all, my colleagues, a vote for this bill is a vote of confidence. It is a vote of confidence that America can rise above the divisions of party, of race, of class. It is a vote of confidence in the work and the wisdom of this House, working as a bipartisan team. Let's pass this bill and go home with our heads high.
Jim Kessler, as we showed our viewers a bit ago, the assault weapons ban focused on 18 specific firearms, including certain models of AR-15s and AK-47s, banned certain military type of features on weapons, set a limit on high-capacity magazines, and was in effect for 10 years. But the definition of what an assault weapon was such a key part of that debate. Explain how you came up with those 18 specific firearms that were included here.
Well, so like anything that Congress is going to do, it involves compromise, and this was a bill. When the assault weapons ban passed, it passed 216 to 214. So in some ways, the definition was designed to get assault weapons, but also what is the most we could do and still get enough votes to pass. So the term assault weapons actually came from the gun industry. Because there is no actual definition of assault weapons. There isn't a particular type of weapon that's called an assault weapon. It came from Guns and Ammo magazine back in the 1980s. There was a new type of civilian gun that had a lot of military-style features. So specific guns were banned. There was like the Tech 9, there was an AK-47 copy, there was the AR-15. But they were generally guns, and I guess the way to think about it is they're the guns that sort of resembled those that you saw in Die Hard. They were guns that were designed often to be shot from the hip rather than from the shoulder or out in front of the chest. They were guns that had military-style features. And then what was also put in there, because people thought, well, you're going to take away my gun, there was a list of over 1,000 guns that were specifically not banned on the list that says, look, if you have these, you're fine. But, you know, like anything else, it was the nexus of what would be the most effective and what could get the maximum amount of votes.
And the pushback came over that definition. Here's Wayne LaPierre, then the executive vice president of the NRA, at a press conference earlier in the spring after the assault weapons ban was first unveiled, the provisions in it.
Mm-hmm.
These firearms were well, I am answering with the pie chart. If you look at the pie chart of weapons used in U.S. homicides, these firearms are used in less than 1% of U.S. homicides. They are not the weapon of choice in America, as we've heard.
Why does anyone need this type of gun? Why?
People hunt with self-loading firearms in all 48 states. They're used in the Olympics, they're used in competitions, they're used for personal protection, and they're owned by 30 to 40 million Americans, and they're about as mainstream firearm as you can get. The president says that he knows guns, and yet when he goes duck hunting, he picks up a Benelli shotgun, which is exactly the same as the type of gun he wants to ban. What I'm saying is these people simply don't know guns. I was in a gun store in Alexandria yesterday listening to the customers, and I was surrounded by a group of United States Marines. They're all shaking their head and they're saying the president just doesn't understand guns. So my challenge, if he does, come on out to the Fairfax Rod and Gun Club, high noon on Wednesday, bring your bad guns, and we'll show you they don't shoot any different, Mr. President, than the good guns you say you don't want to ban.
Jim Kessler, key staffer during that debate. Some of the pushback then, is it the same pushback that you hear today when it comes to the gun debate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar. The argument is the difference of these guns and other guns that are used in crime tend to be more cosmetic than functional. I don't think that's true. These guns are different. You can take high-capacity clips. You can shoot them very rapidly. It's not a fully automatic weapon, but sometimes they can be converted into fully automatic weapons. And the truth is, yeah, most guns that are used in crime tend to be handguns, but the question also is, okay, what kind of society do we want to live in? Do we want a society in which people are having guns that are more similar to Uzis and AK-47s and bringing them out to places to commit violence, or do we want to have some sort of limits on that Second Amendment right? And every amendment has its limitations. The question is, where are you going to draw that line?
We're asking our viewers if you want to join in this conversation with Jim Kessler of Third Way. He's Senior Vice President for Policy there, worked in the House at the time of the assault weapons ban was passed, also served as Director of Policy and Research for Americans for Gun Safety, which was eventually folded into Third Way. Republicans, it's 202-748-8001. Democrats, 202-748-8000. Independents, 202-748-8002. We'll get to your calls, but I just want to ask, 10 years the assault weapons ban was in effect. The provision sunsetted in 2004, was not renewed. Was it effective?
It was effective in that it brought down the number of crimes committed with those types of guns. So yeah, I think it was effective. There were two gun control laws passed in the 1990s, the Brady Law and the assault weapons ban. The Brady Law was the more important law. There's no doubt about it. The background check law is more important, but the assault weapons law was important too. It would be nice if that was still in effect.
We're talking about it and talking about the debate today. Rudy's up first, San Antonio, Texas, line for Democrats. Rudy, good morning.
Good morning, Stan. Thanks for taking my call. As a combat Marine with 14 combat operations and a Purple Heart, I don't understand how they can use the term assault weapon for protection. Assault means taking a village, going up a hill, it's an offense word. It's a word that means going on the offense. Now, I'm a Second Amendment supporter, and you want to look bad and you want to carry your rifle, your AK-47, your M16, whatever, with a 30-round clip, that's fine. But you're limited to 3 rounds. Why do you have to have 30 rounds to go hunting? And also, when the bullet leaves the chamber, or when the bullet goes down the barrel, if it hits the perpetrator, it's still going to keep going through him into another, hit a tree, hit a rock, hit a chicken, a grandma, a Viet Cong, a Marine, whatever. Why do you need 30 rounds? I would make a law saying that you can only carry 3 rounds in the magazine, and anything over that, then you're going to be charged 10 years automatic. You go to jail.
Great, thanks for the call from San Antonio, Texas. The debate over magazines and capacity of magazines.
Well, that was also in the assault weapons ban, that it limited the capacity of magazines, and that's the number of rounds that can be in a gun at one time. And there are magazines that have 30 rounds, even more these days. I think your caller Rudy was right. Like, why do we really need something that has that level of lethality? And what is the purpose of this, and where do we draw some sort of lines here? And when you had Wayne LaPierre up there and he said, I was in a gun store and there were military people who were shaking their heads. When we passed the assault weapons ban and when we passed the Brady Law, people who had been in the military, like Rudy, they were mostly on our side. They thought, like, no, this is weapons that are used in war. These are not weapons that are used at home. So I challenged Wayne LaPierre on whether military people were with us or against us at that time.
Let's go to Judy waiting in Duval, Washington. Line for Independence. Judy, good morning. You're on with Jim Kessler.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I just have a couple of quick comments. The gun control issue is out of control as far as I'm concerned. Every time Obama comes to the podium and talks about gun control, does he not realize that that soars gun sales? And remember, Obama himself and his people have gun protection around them 24/7. Where is ours coming from? Shame on Obama. Who the hell does he think he is? Shame on him. Thank you.
It's very true that under Democratic presidencies, gun sales go up, and under Republican presidencies, gun sales go down. So the best thing that can happen for the gun industry essentially is a Democrat becoming president. There's this sense that there's going to be strict gun control laws. You're not going to be able to buy certain things. For the most part, that has been false. And there is also, when there is an incident like Sandy Hook or in San Bernardino, there is a spike in gun sales. That is undoubtedly true. Individuals in this country, private individuals, own more than 300 million guns. In almost every single state, there is a right to carry firearms, on your person outside of your home. We have a country in which guns are very, very prevalent. It's not working real well for us. We have very high crime rates. We have mass murder rates. We need to do more, not a ton more, but we need more to kind of protect innocent people against the violence that's out here.
What do you expect might come out in terms of executive action, and if you can walk through sort of the current legislative efforts and whether any of them might get momentum?
So I think it's going to be very difficult to pass something in Congress. You might be able to do something about terrorist watch list, about if you're on a no-fly list, will you then be added to the list of prohibited buyers? That would be good. That would be helpful. That is a fairly minor change in the law. Congress has really been broken on guns for a long, long time. On executive action, what you've heard is the president trying to figure out some sort of way to get some private sales. If you and I have a gun, if you and I lived in Virginia and I wanted to sell you a gun and we were complete strangers, I can sell you that firearm and there's no background check. The president, I think, through executive action is trying to find some way to put that under the rubric of a sale that requires a background check. That is the big hole in the system right now, that you have this entire framework, legal framework to sell guns with background checks, and then you have this entire legal framework to sell guns without background checks. And it's, how do you shrink that loophole? By executive order, he may be able to tighten that a little bit by what's called the in the business clause. So let's say I am selling firearms to you, we're private individuals. If I'm in the business of selling firearms, I'm supposed to perform a background check on you. But that is a very murky definition. So I think what we've heard is the president is trying to strengthen that definition of in the business.
By possibly number of sales each year?
By possibly number of sales. So I heard the number 5. If you're selling 5 guns, you're in the business. And then possibly by where you're selling those firearms. So if you are at a gun show, okay, just the fact that you're at a place of commerce selling that gun should have a background check.
Benita's up next. Riverton, Wyoming, line for Republicans. Good morning, Benita.
Good morning. Thank you for C-SPAN. I don't believe anybody's getting what is going on here. People are out of work. They can't feed their families. The children are going hungry, and they are tired of this. And that's what blows up this gun thing. The Democrats want to take the guns. Guns are needed. We're in Wyoming. They turned the grizzly bears loose on us, the wolves loose on us, and they think that them things don't attack people. Why, there's been so many attacks this year from grizzly bears. What are you going to do? You can't even go for a walk. I don't own a gun anymore. I'm an old woman and I don't need a gun. But I'll tell you what, the young people should learn how to shoot, and everybody should remember the Holocaust, because it happens, and it isn't going to just go away if you don't have some protection. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Benita, thanks for the call. The argument that Benita's making right there, here's an argument from the House floor back in 1994 during the debate over the assault weapons ban. This is Arthur Ravenel, Republican of South Carolina.
Speaker, of course, the most objectionable feature of this bill is its assault on the Second Amendment. And in that context, I'd just like to remind the House of a couple of things. You know, if they had banned the assault weapons of 1775, we probably would not have been able to win the first American Revolution. And when they were touring the death camps under World War II, after World War II, and the group went to Treblinka, the question was asked, how could 6 million Jews and other minorities, twice the population of Israel, how could they have let what happened to them happen to them? Why didn't they fight? And of course the answer was, with what? So naturally, I will vote to recommit.
Jim Kessler, the arguments from today to back in 1994.
It's great to see Arthur Ravenel again raving on the House floor. So look, this is one of the big fig leaves on the gun rights side. Like, no one is talking about taking away people's Second Amendment rights. And in fact, the latest Supreme Court decision, the Heller decision in 2005, the Supreme Court justices, which ruled that the Second Amendment is a right, they said it is a right that allows for restrictions, and specifically mentioned things like assault weapons. So the question is, where are we going to draw that line? All right? So in the 1930s, we drew that line with fully automatic weapons, the Tommy gun that you saw in gangster movies. Okay, so we passed a law that said fully automatic weapons are, they can't be sold for civilian use with some very rare exceptions. The Republic has survived, okay? Assault weapons, that's another place where we should be drawing this line. There are still going to be about 299,500,000 other guns out there in people's hands that they can use to protect themselves. So, it's not going to be the thing where people's guns are going to be taken away. And even with an assault weapons ban, it's just that you can't manufacture anymore or sell anymore in stores. So no one's talking about gun bans.
Let's head down to Florida, where Phyllis is waiting. Line for Democrats. Phyllis, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, thank you for taking my call. I have a question. I'm curious about the studies, the public health studies in relationship to guns and violence. I hear that there's that you can't study, or there's banned on studying the results concerning public health and guns. And also, I wanted to know, where does the medical community stand, on this, studying of violence and public health?
Thank you. So, Phyllis, there is a ban that Congress has passed that prevents the Centers of Disease Control from studying firearm deaths and injuries from a public health standpoint. That has been put in by gun rights supporters. It is one of many special provisions that the gun industry and the gun rights lobby has put in to Congress that is unlike anything else that any other industry has. I want to give you another one. There is a law that says you cannot sue gun manufacturers or gun stores. So they have immunity from lawsuits that no other industry in the country has. So they operate by special rules. The truth of the matter is, the gun rights advocates, the Second Amendment purists, they have a fear of data and of information. So even information about gun traces, when a gun is committed in a crime and they trace it back to the source, who bought the gun, who resold it, there's a ban on making that information public as well. So they're afraid of information. Every other place we're getting more data and more information. On the gun industry, we're stopping it. It's a shame.
Some data that's come out this week on opinion polling from the New York Times made a lot of headlines on conservative websites. Majority of Americans oppose assault weapons ban for the first time in 20 years, according to New York Times polling. That from Breitbart yesterday. Here's the actual polling questions from the New York Times itself, asking if those respondents favor or oppose a national ban on assault weapons. 50% now saying that they oppose, as opposed to 44% saying that they favor. Surprising to you?
A little bit. I mean, I feel that the ban discussion, in some ways I feel the country has moved from a ban discussion to a discussion of other things that need to happen with guns, including background checks and kind of tightening the screws and tightening loopholes. And I also feel like, as the caller from Wyoming said earlier, like, there is fear right now, and I think fear is, I think people are kind of pulling back a little bit. I just want to say one other thing about guns, and one of the reasons why it's very hard to pass these gun laws. For the most part, gun crime in this country is concentrated in urban areas. Gun ownership is very, very diffuse. So we had a caller, the caller from, I think it was Benita from Wyoming. It doesn't really matter what gun laws you're going to pass in Wyoming. Wyoming is a very, very rural state. It's very, very sparse. There's very little crime. It doesn't matter what you're going to be doing there. But those two senators get a vote, and the House member gets a vote as well. The amount of gun homicides that were committed in January 2013 in Chicago equaled the total number of homicides that were committed in New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, Montana, South Dakota, and North Dakota combined over the course of a year. So crime is concentrated, gun ownership very diffuse.
Chico, California's next. Mark's waiting. Line for Independence. Mark, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you, Jim.
Good morning.
I'm a disabled Vietnam veteran. I did 2 tours in Vietnam, and I owned guns before I went in the service. And after having a couple of my best friends killed and one die in my arms, when I got back, I got rid of my guns, and I have no use to shoot somebody or have somebody shoot me. And I think it's reckless for these assault weapons that are needed for war, but until you have somebody die in your arms that you care about, war is hell. We're not in war over here. I don't mind people having weapons to hunt with, but it's just until people really are in positions like I have been in my life, they might think about it a little bit different. Thank you.
So the call, Mark.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for calling. Thank you for your service and for your very, very passionate words. I mean, you know, there is, people should be able to own firearms to protect themselves. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. There's a line we have to draw. We drew the line in the 1930s with machine guns. There are still types of weapons that are out there that are sold for public use that they just have no business being in civilian hands. They have no business proliferating. And they don't make this country safer. They make this country less safe.
Franklin, Tennessee's up next. Eric's waiting. Line for Republicans. Eric, good morning.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I've got a farm, and in a rural county, the driveway is a half a mile long. I've had to call the sheriff 3 or 4 times over the years, and it takes 20-25 minutes. I do have a 1944 M1 carbine that has a 14 capacity magazine, and I have 4 of them. I've never used it. I've never threatened anyone, but, you know, if it comes to protecting myself, I'm the one that can do it. I have some antique, like Winchester rifles that have 7 capacity, barrel tubes. I don't know the difference between a lever action Winchester that holds 7 high-powered rounds versus my M1 carbine that holds 14. So M114 is an assault weapon. I mean, certainly. But my Winchester is more powerful, more dangerous, and more effective. So I don't know, how do you get rid of all of these things? Because it's a collector's item, but it is fully functional. And from my perspective, my driveway's a half mile long. If I needed a gun, I'm not sure which one I pick up first.
Jim Kessler, again on the definitions.
Well, I think the M1 carbine is a fully automatic gun, so it's a machine gun. And there are very few of those that are still out in civilian hands. You can get a special license to own those firearms, but that is a machine gun that's very hard to get. Yeah, the definition, there's a line to draw. So the definition in the assault weapons ban is is a gun that can take a detachable clip and a series of other characteristics. So the detachable clip is the kind of the first thing that you have in the definition. But then it's things like bayonet mount, grenade launcher, threaded barrel so that you can hold the gun like this and it doesn't heat up, pistol grips, things like that. So, a line needs to be drawn somewhere on this. But, again, I would say to your caller, to Eric, no one's talking about taking away his right to own firearms and to protect his home. And, we realize, when we tried to craft this law, we realized there are people who live in places like in rural areas in Tennessee that the way they protect themselves, it's not going to be police coming to them. They live 30 minutes away. So we felt that law struck the right balance.
What about the criticism of that law, that it focused on the wrong problem if the end goal was to protect more Americans? Lois Beckett had a column in the New York Times in 2014 that said that the law that barred the sale of assault weapons from 1994 to 2004 made little difference. It turns out that big, scary military rifles don't kill the vast majority of the 11,000 Americans murdered with guns each year. Little handguns do. In 2012, only 322 people were murdered with any kind of rifle, according to FBI data.
Right. So, excuse me, if you're going to die from a handgun in this country, or from a gun in this country, the most likely way you're going to die is from a handgun, and not from bullets 10, 11, or 12, of bullets 1, 2, or 3. That is absolutely true. That is why we have the Brady Law. That's why we need other laws that require background checks on private sales. That's why we need to crack down on gun trafficking. That's why we need to close all these loopholes that bring guns from the legal market to the illegal market with impunity. So yeah, I would say those are the most important things to do. There's also, even though it's a small number of killings, there's a reason why it's a small number of killings. One was, we did impose a ban on these for 10 years. It did have an effect. When we did the assault weapons ban in 1994, the number of crimes and killings with these types of guns, like the Tech 9 and the Mac 10 and AK-47 knockoffs, they were on the increase. And in the gang wars that were happening in the late 80s and in the early 90s, those guns became the weapons of choice. So, you know, at the time, those were on the upswing. Those were the things that were showing up more and more in crime. And very importantly, police all across the country were in favor of this ban because they just felt outgunned. They felt, we have no chance anymore. We've got our Smith & Wessons. We have no chance against these guns.
Let's go to Edward on our line for Democrats. I'm going to try the name of the city. Is it Tangipahoa, Louisiana?
Yes, sir. You're right.
All right. Go ahead, Edward.
I was calling because I was in the military when the M16 rifle first came into our inventory. It was the happiest moment of my life. And I remember one of the statements that our commander made at that time. And the statement he made to us as military personnel was that we must do everything that we could do to keep this weapon out of the hands of the civilian community. Because this weapon, the M16, is made for war. It is called an assault weapon because you use it to assault a particular land area to kill. And that is why it is called an assault weapon. But there's no one can convince me. And by the way, I spent 2 tours in Vietnam. There's no one that can convince me that there is a need for someone to have an assault weapon unless that person is going to engage in a wartime situation. That is why we have an assault weapon, is to fight a war. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edward. Look, this is another example, another caller who has military experience, who's calling and saying, like, these are war weapons. There are other weapons that are civilian weapons. When we fought for this ban in 1994, veterans of military conflicts, they were, for the most part, on our side. They saw that there was a dividing point in in these types of firearms.
Is there a coalition that you think could be formed again in this day and age? Again, the president's comments, we need to make it harder for people to buy powerful assault weapons, is what he said in his Oval Office address.
Yeah, I think that coalition has to include people who were formerly in the military, and I also think that coalition has to include police, and not just like the national police organizations and the national police chiefs that are in Washington, but local police chiefs and local police sheriffs in counties and in cities. And when we passed those laws in the 1990s, and again in 2004, when it expired, my former group, Americans for Gun Safety, we were able to pass it through the Senate. We couldn't get it through the House at the time. We had 700 local police chiefs and sheriffs supporting that law and closing the gun show loophole in 20 key states. And that was very, very important. So I do think we need local police there, besides, citizenry.
Dianne Feinstein, senator from California, dropped a bill in 2013 that was not able to move another assault weapons ban that she worked on at that time. It was January of 2013 when she originally introduced the assault weapons ban. I believe that's the most recent of one that gained any momentum.
Yes, and it is stronger than the law that passed in 1994. So the law that in 1994 was detachable clip and then 2 military-style characteristics. Hers is detachable clip and 1 characteristic. So it's trying to make the law more stringent.
Let's head out to Washington. David, thanks for waiting. Line for Republicans. Go ahead.
Good morning. Yes, just trying to say, if we're all Minutemen, why are they limiting our capacity to our magazines? I mean, it's no secret that one time in this country we had to take up arms, and and we know the enemy's within us, right, or amongst us right now, and all over. I mean, that's easy to see. They're coming from every direction, from different countries and everywhere. And you limit our capacity to defend ourselves. Well, I wonder whose side the administration is actually on. This country needs to stand up and take it back, like Trump says, for it's gone, because it's shortly going to be taken away from us, because you can see it's slowly going. And the enemy's right here. They're all around us. You can see that, like they did in California just recently. They're all.
Jim Kessler, go ahead.
So that perspective that David just brought, that is the perspective that dominates the modern day gun rights movement, which is, we are very, very close to having this country being taken over either by external forces or by a evil internal government force that is going to impose tyranny on Americans. That is not a mainstream view out in America, but that is the view of the activist gun rights community right now, and really for the last 10 or 12 years. The thing that I find scary about that is not this view of the, a future world of like the Terminator or, the Road Warrior, but it is that is the view that is really dominating what Congress does and what is happening in state legislatures. And I just think that, we have to shrug this off and have a more rational perspective of what's going on in this country.
Let's go to Shohola, Pennsylvania, where Roger's waiting line for Democrats. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning. I just want to clarify, it seems to be a lot of confusion. All that was passed in 94 was that they got rid of the bayonet clip, they got rid of the flash suppressor, and they made the magazine down to 10. That was all that was done. The argument is over semi-autos. The semi-auto was still there, the gun was still available, but just without those things that I just mentioned. In New York State and Connecticut, they just got rid of the semi-autos altogether. You can't even own, is my understanding, and that's what the whole debate. It has nothing to do with assault rifles. It's just a term. It's over the semi-auto, and you can get even during the ban, you could still get the 30-round clip online or under the table. It was still readily available, and in the Second Amendment says you can have a gun, for the right to have a militia against a tyrannical government. So you can't fight a tyrannical government without a semi-auto rifle. However, in 2008, the Supreme Court made the comma a period. So now they actually hurt their own cause, because now they can make the argument that because of making it a period, they can still make the argument that and ban semi-autos. So the whole argument should be over the semi-auto.
Gotcha.
Nearly every firearm that's sold now is a semi-automatic. So the difference between fully automatic and semi-automatic, for your viewers who don't know, is fully automatic is if you press the trigger, the gun continues to shoot. Okay, just one press, you hold it down, the gun continues to shoot. Semi-automatic is you have to each time you shoot, you have to press, but the next round is automatically loaded into the chamber. Nearly every firearm that's sold now is semi-automatic, and even in the 90s, they were semi-automatic. It was whether it had other military-style features. I just want to read something, though, from that Supreme Court decision, because this was written by Scalia, and it says, it's called the Heller decision, and it's the decision that basically said you can't ban people from owning all firearms. There is an individual constitutional right to own a gun. Like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. Nothing, in our opinion, should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carry of firearms in sensitive places, as well as prohibiting dangerous and unusual weapons. That is not Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That is Justice Scalia, and it basically says, like, look, you can't ban people from owning firearms, period. But there's a place where you can draw that line. And they're signaling there, and they just rejected a case, another challenge to the Supreme Court on assault weapons that said, like, yeah, these are constitutional. These assault weapons bans that states had, that the federal government had at one point or another, these are constitutional. You don't have to worry about breaking the Second Amendment.
Only a minute or two left in this segment. Want to get in David. It's been waiting in Rockwall, Texas, line for independence. David, can you make it quick?
Yes, sir. How do you equate Sandy Hook shooting with the San Bernardino shooting?
So I think they're different. I think the Sandy Hook shooting is a particular style of mass shooting, which is when you have someone who is insane and has easy access to firearms and what they can do. And San Bernardino, we're learning more about San Bernardino, but what we know right now is this is more a crime against the country. This is somebody trying to make a political terrorist type statement and a different set of motivations.
David, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, you're carrying water for the Democrats, trying to make this San Bernardino shooting appear that it wasn't a terrorist act by radical Islam. You're just another shill for the Democrats. I mean, it's really pretty pathetic.
Okay, so David, let me be clear. The San Bernardino killing, it was a, radical Islamist, jihadist, terrorist attack on innocent Americans, to the best of our knowledge at this point. And that certainly seems what it is to me. I think this is the beginning of a trend that we're going to see. I don't think this is the last terrorist attack within the country that is based on some level of religious extremism, jihadist extremism. I think it's one of the reasons why we need to tighten our gun laws. It is not by far the only thing that we need to do here. There's other things we need to do to combat this terrorism. But I do think the notion that somebody could buy a gun and then sell it to this horrible terrorist without a background check, without breaking the law, I think that's a crime too.
Jim Kessler is Senior Vice President for Policy at Third Way. You can check out their work, thirdway.org. Excuse me. You can also follow them on Twitter at Third Way Tweet. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Up next, we'll be joined by...
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.